Welcome to a new edition of Euroquestions, our bi-monthly webinars where we present the Jacques Delors Institute's research and analyze European news. Today, we are very pleased to welcome our senior research fellow, Eulalia Rubio, who will discuss what we can expect from the application of the rule of law conditionality against Hungary and the implications this may have in the context of the long rule of law clash between Hungary and the European Union. Indeed, on Sunday, the 18th of September, the European Commission proposed a 7.5 billion euro cut from Hungary's EU funds in application of the rule of law conditionality mechanism. It is now up to member states to take a decision within a maximum of 3 months. This proposal arrives at the moment when the European Parliament has declared Hungary a, I quote, hybrid regime of electoral autocracy, and with the EU's executive still blocking the adoption of the Hungarian recovery plan over similar rule of law and corruption issues. Now, these are the questions that we will address today with our speaker. Before handing over the floor, I'd just like to remind you that the Q&A tool is available at the bottom of your screen. You can ask all your questions and I will submit them to our speaker in the second part of this 30-minute webinar. Without further ado, I leave the floor to Eulalia Rubio for her presentation.
Thank you, Matthew. So there are some slides that I think will arrive. So what I will try to do with this short time is just to refresh a bit our minds on what is this new mechanism of rule of law conditionality tool. And then we will look at what is the application of this mechanism, what has happened until now in the application of this mechanism against Hungary, and where do we stand, and we will discuss a bit the possible scenarios in the end of the application of this mechanism. So what is the rule of law conditionality mechanism? It's a new mechanism that was adopted in 2020 when we negotiated this big package of a recovery fund plus multi-annual financial framework. It is a tool that allows the Union to suspend funds for some member states in case of breaches of the rule of law principles that affect or risk affecting the EU budget. That means that it is not an instrument to suspend funds against any type of violation of rule of law principles. There has to be cases in which there has been a violation of rule of law principles that have a connection or that can imply a risk for the EU budget. And for instance, questions related with media freedom or questions related with the preservation of rights of LGBTI collectives or things of the gender do not enter into the scope of application of this instrument. Basically, what enters into the scope of applications are three types of scenarios: actions or omissions by public authorities in charge of implementing or controlling the use of EU funds, actions also or omissions by public authorities in charge of investigating, prosecuting cases of fraud, corruption, and misuse of funding. And then all questions related with judicial independence, because we assume that in a country without judicial independence, if there are misbehaviors of these other public authorities that I have referred to, well, they will not be prosecuted, they will not be punished by the judges. So these are the three main areas in which you can imagine the application of this instrument. As I say, it's new. It entered into force in January 2021. The Commission has taken some time to apply it because there was this right after the adoption of this instrument. Hungary and Poland, you will remember that they brought the case to the Court of Justice and they asked for a ruling on the legality of this instrument, and the Commission decided to hold the instrument before having the decision of the Court. The decision of the Court arrived at the beginning of this year, and then the first application of this instrument is right now with Hungary, that started right after the elections in Hungary. It is quite a strong instrument in the sense that we say that it has a preventive approach, in the sense that the Commission can always propose the suspension of funds in case of risks affecting the EU budget. There is no need to prove that there has been a misuse of EU funds. And that distinguishes these instruments from the different instruments that are already at the hand of the Commission to suspend funds in case in which there is evidence of a project, for instance, in which there has been a irregularity or problem of conflict of interest or corruption. So how it works in terms of procedure, It starts with the Commission sending a formal notification to the member state when it builds a case and it has evidence of these situations that can enter into the scope of application of the conditionality mechanism. Then there is a period of 3 to 5 months of bilateral exchange with the member state, in which the member state can be invited to provide additional information, can also make observations or clarifications, and can also propose remedial measures to respond to the weaknesses or to the problems that have been detected by the Commission. If these remedial measures are deemed insufficient by the Commission, then the Commission proposed to the Council to apply measures to protect the EU budget in this country. And this can be very varied. That it can go from total suspension of EU funds received by this country to partial suspension of specific programs, or to a prohibition to adopt new programs in this country. And then it is the Council that has to decide. It's the Council who decides, and normally it has 1 month to decide, but that can be extended up to 3 months under exceptional circumstances. And very important, the vote in the Council is under qualified majority voting. So as I said, the first application of this new instrument is now with Hungary. Next slide, please. We have to start, the procedure start, as I say, after the Hungarian elections at the end of April. And there were 3 issues of concern that were raised by the Commission that justify the application of this procedure. One was the existence of major deficiencies in public procurement procedures in Hungary. That's something that is quite well known and well documented in the past. Public procurement in Hungary has a problem of lack of transparency and lack of competition. And something that is generally said is that there's an abnormal high level of contracts that are awarded after public procurement procedures in which there is only one firm bid. There is also an abnormal number of contracts awarded to firms that are politically connected to the government. So there are several of these situations that make very problematic the tenders in Hungary in the distribution of EU spending. The other issue of concern is this new legal figure created by the Orban government, which is the Public Interest Foundation, so Public Interest Trust. That's a new legal body. It's a private foundation to which it is they have entrusted public tasks. And actually, there has been a legislation, Hungarian legislation creating this new legal figure. And they have created probably 30 of these new public interest foundations, and many of them have been entrusted to manage universities, for instance. And what's the problem with these new foundations is that they are private bodies, they are private foundations, and therefore the governance is quite opaque. They are not subject to the same level of public scrutiny in the use of public funding, whereas they receive a lot of funds, EU funds and national funds. And the governing bodies are also quite a field of people close to the government, and therefore the Commission criticizes this and says that they do not want these foundations to receive and to manage a lot of public funding because they don't have the capacity to control the use of these funds. On top of that, these foundations being private, they are not subject to the same level of the same type of rules in terms of conflict of interest, in terms of public procurement when they distribute funds. So there are many problems with these legal figures to manage EU funds. And the third point is the general lack of an effectiveness of the bodies in charge of investigating, prosecuting, and preventing corruption in Hungary. So these were the 3 main issues of concern. And during the summer, the Hungarian government replied. There were changes with the Commission, bilateral changes, with clarifications, with the provision of additional information from the Hungarian government. And in the end, the Hungarian government also proposed a list of 17 remedial measures to the deficiencies highlighted by the Commission. I will not list the 17 measures. They are very specific, some of them, but among the most important or the most portrayed ones in the media, there was this idea of creating an independent anti-corruption authority. There was also the proposal to establish an anti-corruption task force that would be composed by members of the civil society and would be in charge of debating and discussing a new anti-corruption strategy for Hungary. And there were also, for instance, generic commitments to reduce the number of single bid contracts and to reinforce cooperation with OLAF, which is the EU agency in charge of investigating corruption and fraud in the use of EU funding. After the proposal of these 17 remedial measures, next slide, please. At the end of September, the Commission acknowledged welcomed these remedial measures, but nevertheless proposed to the Council the adoption of some measures to protect the budget in Hungary, and particularly it proposed to suspend 65% of EU funds from 3 specific cohesion programs, not from all cohesion programs that Hungary is gonna adopt now, but only 3 of them, which are considered to be mainly managed through public procurement, and therefore it makes sense in this sense to suspend the funds of these 3 programs. And according to experts, that corresponds it is more or less equivalent to 15 to 20% of the total cohesion funding that Hungary has to receive for 2021-2027. So I clarify, this is funding for 2021-2027. Hungary is still using a bit of funds from 2014-2020. This is not touched by this proposal of the Commission. And apart from that, there is this other proposal to exclude these public interest foundations from participating to any EU funded programs. Since they are most of them universities, this is mainly about participation in the 2 main funded programs that in which the university participates, which are research programs and Erasmus, because they receive students. So that was the proposal of the Commission. Nevertheless, in the same letter, in the same proposal of Council implementing decision, there was an opening of a possible compromise with Hungary that was hinted a bit in the writings of the Commission, because the Commission welcomed the remedial measures proposed by Hungary. It also gave 2 months to Hungary to adopt these remedial measures and start implementing them. So it gave until 19th of November to pass the required laws and implementing acts to create, for instance, this anti-corruption body, independent anti-corruption body, and the other things, and commit to keep the Council informed on the progress made by the Hungarian government in putting into place these remedial measures. And that made many people think that, in fact, one of the possible scenarios, and I will come back to this in the next slide, is to wait until not to suspend the funds to Hungary for the moment, and wait until give the possibility to the Hungarian government to put into place these remedial measures, and to judge once these remedial measures will be put into place whether it is necessary to suspend or not the funds. But I will come back to this later on. Just to finalize with this slide, where do we stand now? Now we wait for the decision of the Council. As I said, it has to be voted under qualified majority voting, and in principle it had to be voted within 1 month, but that would be 19th of October, so quite early. And all seems to indicate that the Council will ask for an extension of 2 months. That is normally for exceptional circumstances, probably under the argument that they need time to see whether the Hungarian government put into place or not these remedial measures that are supposed to be adopted by mid-November. Actually, today, I think, is the COREPER discussing this possibility of extending this deadline to the end of December. And in this case, it will be, we will have to wait until the end of December to see what is the decision of the Council on that. So what are the possible scenarios? Now this is where do we stand now? What can happen in this decision of the Council? The hot potato now is the hands of the Council. There are theoretically 4 possible scenarios. The first one, scenario A, is just that the Council adopt the Commission's proposal as it has been proposed. That is this 65% suspension of 3 cohesion programs plus exclusion of public interest foundations from EU programs. This is quite unlikely to happen. We know that the Council there is no really a lot of willingness to have a direct fight with Hungary. So it's there's a tendency, or we know that there will be many member states that would prefer to find a compromise, something more constructive with Hungary, because there is this fear that Hungary can reply by blocking a lot of other decisions to be taken during this winter, notably as regards sanctions against Russia, but other issues also that are subjected to unanimity, like the taxation issue, or like any other measure that we have to put into place to fight against this energy crisis. The second scenario would be like scenario A, but with a reduction of the penalty. Let's say the Council might be pressured also politically, and particularly by the Parliament, to decide something, to suspend, but might decide to suspend a much lower amounts of funding for Hungary, like for instance 30% or 20% instead of 65%. But the scenarios that seem much more likely now, or more probable, are C or D. D being a variant of C. The scenario C is what I was a bit explaining before, is the possibility that the Council decide not to suspend right now the funds for Hungary, and propose instead to the Commission to monitor the full implementation of these measures, knowing that these measures will not be fully implemented by the end of the year, and to ensure this monitoring and this implementation by putting these measures, or the fulfillment of the achievement of these measures, as conditions for the release of payments in the Hungarian recovery plan. That is, as milestones, as objectives that the Hungarian government has to achieve in each tranche to receive the payments of the recovery funds. That would mean that at the same time that the Council takes this decision, the Council adopts also this Hungarian recovery plan, which is still on hold, is not adopted, and that would be a sort of package that could take place at the end of December. That is, for Hungary, would be a victory, because it would be receiving the whole of all the money, so not having the suspension of 7.5 billion that was proposed by the Commission and the rule of law conditionality mechanism, plus having the 7.5 billion also that are in the recovery plan. A variant of this scenario C is that the Council do not suspend the cohesion funding for Hungary. It decides also to put these 70 measures, monitor the implementation of these 70 measures in the recovery plan, but apart from that, ask the Commission to put milestones to ask in the recovery plan, to ask the Hungarian government to put into place measures to improve or to guarantee the judiciary independence. Because one of the things that have been criticized in this procedure of rule of law against Hungary is that the Commission has left aside the problem of judiciary independence. There is also a lack of independence in the Hungarian judiciary system. It falls into the scope of application of the rule of law conditionality, as I said in the beginning, but the Commission decided not to touch upon this issue voluntarily, saying that maybe that would be something to be discussed in the future, and therefore concentrate only on the questions of corruption and use of funds. And it seems that some people, and particularly within the Commission, also some commissioners, are on the side, or are on the opinion that would be good also to, if they do not suspend the funds right now, to ask also Hungarian government to do efforts to improve this judicial independence, to include this important issue also as one of the conditionalities to continuously receive recovery funds in the coming years. So that are the four possible scenarios. I will stop here, and I am happy to receive questions and to discuss about what can happen with Hungary and the EU budget in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Eulalia, for your presentation. We'll delve in straight away into the questions. I'd like to start maybe questions on the four scenarios you presented. In the event of scenarios C and D, so the monitoring of the European Commission of the implementation of the 17 remedial measures, how long are we talking on this monitoring? Is it a matter of years or a matter of
Well, we know that the recovery fund, normally there are 2 payments per year, so probably there will be milestones. I mean, normally the milestones in the recovery funds, for the same action, there might be different milestones. It can be that there is an interim milestone, for instance, for the establishment of this corruption body. Maybe it is created, the anti-corruption body is created in November, but maybe there is an interim milestone to create some implementing acts at the first or second semester of next year, and then another milestone at the end of the year, more related to the output of this body. Because the one thing that is also said in this Commission proposal to the Council to suspend funds is that it is very important to make sure that there is results also. There is not only the adoption of the body or the adoption of this task force that translates into results in terms of reduction of corruption, or for instance in the case of public procurement, into reduction of the number of single bidding contracts, etc. So it might be different milestones for the same type of thing, and normally milestones will be twice per year actually, because this is the way it is organized, the recovery funds. Only during the duration of the recovery fund, of course, the recovery plan.
I'm getting another question by 2 different auditors. Is there a 5th scenario where the Commission would withdraw its proposal?
But the Commission cannot formally withdraw the proposal of rule of law conditionality. But what has to be said also, that is very specific, is that the Council is always unilaterally capable of modifying the proposal. So the Council does not need any approval or agreement by the Commission to modify. So the Commission makes a proposal of suspension, but the Council can totally decide to take another decision to either suspend more funds, less funds, or different type of funds. So it's, in this sense, there's a lot of power by the Council. The only obligation by the Council is to decide by 3 months what to do on Hungary within this procedure of rule of conditionality, but as regards the measures to be taken is up to the Council, and can even totally scrap the decision of the Commission and decide other type of proposals.
Thank you very much. Another question I have is regarding those 17 remedial measures proposed. How do you view them? Are they a gesture of good faith? Is it a way to maybe gain some time? What's your take on these proposals?
But the proposals are very specific. It is also a bit I would say the fault also the Commission, because the Commission has strictly focused on questions of corruption and prosecution and investigation of corruption and fraud. So they are mainly on these issues and on the issues of public procurement. Some of them are more specific, but some of them are very generic. Like, for instance, the commitment to improve cooperation with OLAF, or the commitment to reduce the number of single bidding contracts. That there is also a demand by the Commission to provide more specific details on this, not only to implement them, but also to provide more specific details on how exactly, what exactly will be these measures. Of course, I have not listed all of them, but there are also measures on improving the governance of these public interest funds. But again, I mean, many of them are very generic. So the Commission also is requesting more information, more details on each of these measures.
Thank you very much. Another question regarding the Council, maybe more politically this time. What is Hungary's strategy, do you think? Are they trying to form certain alliances with certain member states that might be sympathetic to their cause? How do you view their strategy? So you talked about maybe them using other votes and other positions as a means to pressure the Council. What is your take on all that?
Well, what we have seen by already what we can say is that we have seen a total different tone in the Hungarian government. So the Hungarian government, some months ago, even 1 year ago, has a very confrontational tone with EU in general, with the Commission in particular. And during this summer, in the changes of the Commission, it was much more constructive. We also know that the Hungarian government is in need of money, so there is a real need for them to have this recovery fund approved and to avoid the suspension of funds. So the tone has been much more constructive. And in this sense, the other thing to realize is that they have also done an effort, and we have seen it in the last weeks, the justice minister, the Hungarian justice minister, doing traveling around Europe to meet the different heads of government. They have been doing an effort to convince each of the other governments of the importance of having also Hungarians on board for all type of decisions. So I think, of course, one of the strategies of Hungary is saying, well, if you complicate our life with this, we can complicate your life with many other decisions that have to be taken. And we know from the months that we have been in crisis and with the war against Russia that Hungary is one of the delicate actors, in the sense that they are closer to Russia than the others. They have until now adopted all the sanctions, but they can always put problems for the adoption of the next round of sanctions. So I think they play this game. They play the game of saying, well, leave us alone and do not complicate us more our life, and we will do what it is needed to keep the unity and not to block important issues and important decisions to come. And then we'll see what will happen in the council, but of course everything is open. We know that not all member states are on the same side on that, or not all member states are equally let's say firm in the fight against rule of law issues.
Thank you very much. Another question I'd like to ask is you talked about it towards the end of your presentation, the recovery plan. I know this is not the topic of today's webinar, but could you expand a little bit on the procedures on this side, and why is it so difficult to approve the Hungarian recovery plan?
Yeah, the Hungarian recovery plan, I mean, is on hold. We need the Commission to green light it, so to give the positive assessment and to pass it to the Council to be adopted. So it is now at the hands of the Commission. It is quite secret. I mean, for externals, for outsiders, it's very difficult to know exactly what is the problems, but we know more or less that the problems are the same than we have now mentioned for the rule of law conditionality mechanism, meaning problems in the management and control of EU funds, public procurement, and lack of effective action against corruption cases. So we know that more or less, I mean, overlaps the type of issues. The Commission has so far said that these are two parallel issues, but we know that they are connected at the same time, and they might end up being connected, as I said, because one of the possible solutions is to put these 17 measures as milestones for the adoption of the recovery plan. And last but not least, we also know that the Commission is on the opinion that the recovery plan has to be adopted by the end of the year, otherwise Hungary might lose all recovery funds. This is contentious. Not all people have the same interpretation, the same legal interpretation of the recovery recovery facility regulation, but it's true that in the recovery facility regulation, there is an article that says that the Commission has to commit 70% of the funds by the end of this year. And it leaves the interpretation open, the interpretation that it has to, this 70% of funds have to be committed by the end of the year, otherwise can be lost. But as I say, it is contentious. Some people say that this is just an obligation for the Commission, not for the member state. But the Commission insists that it is urgent to adopt this plan because otherwise Hungary can be out of receiving 70% of this recovery plan, this money. That's why it is quite likely to happen that at the end of in December we have this common decision on both issues at the same time.
Thank you very much. Another precision where we are being asked is one of the auditors is reminding us that in 2020-21, some Polish regions had implemented anti-LGBTQ measures and the policies. The EU did cuts on these regions' funds, European funding. Does that fall under the same procedure?
Exactly. No, that's a different procedure. That's EU at that time. They use a different procedure to protect the EU budget. As I say, there are different procedures to protect the EU budget, but the other procedures you have to have evidence that will create a problem for a specific programs. In that case, it was clear that it created a problem of discrimination in final beneficiaries for specific programs, and therefore, in that case, the Commission can suspend funds for specific projects with specific programs. And as I said, the difference with the rule of law conditionality mechanism is that you can do it more broadly and preventive. In the case that you have, a lot of legislation stipulating, for instance, that there is that LGBTI people cannot access public funds in general, then you could preemptively suspend funds. You don't need to have this into the program, EU-funded program, and expect this to happen to suspend the funds.
Thank you. And because time goes by so fast, this will be my last question. Should the European political community draw on the EU budget for its own projects covering energy or connectivity, as seems to be envisaged? Could the conditionality mechanism also apply to members of the European political community?
That's a very forward-looking question, because it still doesn't exist, the EPC. What I can say, that depends on what will happen with the EPC and the type of EU budget we will apply to this new community. If it's the same budget we have now, in theory, the rule of law conditionality mechanism applies, because one of the characteristics of this mechanism is that it applies to all EU funding, including the recovery funds. So yes, in theory, it could apply, but that is in case the EU budget, as we know, we do know now, the current EU budget is extended to this community, which is a big if, because we don't know whether there will be a new budget created for these countries. We don't know this. But the thing to retain is that this rule of law conditionality mechanism is not only for structural funding, not only for recovery funds, it's for all type of funds, including also CAP, Common Agricultural Funds. That has been also one of the criticisms made to the Commission, is that there are also evidence of misuse of CAP funds in Hungary, and they have not been touched. But in theory, it applies to all funds, actually.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation, for taking the time to answer all these questions. I'd like to now address our audience to thank you all for being with us today for this session. Obviously, we encourage you to follow Eulalia Rubio's works on the topic, her publications, webinars, and media interventions as well, where she covers this very important question for the Jacques Delors Institute. We will send over the replay to today's session this afternoon. The next session will be held in French on September 19th with our research fellow on EU energy policy, Camille Defar, and she will treat the topic of energy poverty for us, which seems likely to be a very important topic in the coming winter. I would also like to thank you all more generally. This will be my last Euroquestions. So I'm very happy to have my colleague Lara Martelli, who will present the sessions from now on. Thank you all. Thank you for all of you that have been regularly with us for the past 2 years now. Goodbye. Have a good afternoon.